Welcome to
One sec,
episode.
wait.
Well, what? You stopped me to take a sip of tea.
Nice cup of tea. Oh.
Welcome to episode 46 of the ADHD Adults Podcast. I'm James Brown, author of How to Look Confident by Dyeing Your Hair the Exact Colour of That Robot from the Iron Giant. I mean, I've read it out. Obviously, you changed the script, which you'll want to do. But is that the best film you know of with a robot in it? You're not going to go with Terminator or RoboCop.
It was a book.
Okay, we'll skirt over that. Now I've changed my hair color since we first wrote this. So does this mean that there are going to be lots of now redundant jokes because I had kind of platinum blonde hair that I now don't have? Have I ruined your whole nefarious script plan?
Yes.
Brilliant. Well, that's made my day. Good. So as usual, I'm joined by the man who haunts my nightmares and the nightmares of people in many, many countries around the world now, Dr. Alex Connor. Hi, Alex.
Alex who?
What? I mean, it's what this is because of the. Is that a joke? Is that an imposter syndrome joke?
Yeah.
If it is, I mean, I fucking hate you. But if it is, how are people going to know that's a joke, Alex? It's a podcast. It's shit. It's not funny. I mean, people that haven't met you, Jesus. Anyway, how are you, balloon head?
I'm excellent, thank you, James. Yeah, really good. We're doing very well. On the podcast, I've got the numbers. For some ridiculous reason, we're approaching around 80 to 100,000 listens a month if you add everything up, which is daft. Of those thousands of people, I've been sent a letter.
Listen, you know what?
That's right, James. It's from a Robert from Kidderminster. And he says, I listened to the sex episode, and after what James said, I think James has been reverse conceived. Thanks, Robert. That's a weird letter. I like it. I have been sent a real letter though.
Whatever.
This is from a Harry because I asked. Just wanted to say a big fuck off thank you to you both for creating your podcast. I've been listening on Spotify, but I've also switched to YouTube whenever I'm not on the go, but also just to see for myself Alex's round fucking head. Everything you've said on your podcast is also relevant to me and my own struggles. Thank fuck I'm not as bad as Sam. We've all said that. But really, couldn't put it all into words better than you two can. I've only just begun my diagnosis journey, but having you two ramble on about how defective we are as people with ADHD has been extremely comforting for me, knowing I'm not alone. Thanks. We really loved that one, Harry. Thank you. I liked it a lot.
Yeah.
Also, James.
Yes.
124 countries.
I
know. I think we now have a listener from South Sudan. And 124 is as many countries as James has fake Aldi Mars bars in a little cupboard in his little bedroom.
It's not actually. That is scarily accurate. Pal. What I should say, this could have been used for a game of what has James and Sam forgotten this week, because we bought some chocolate bars for my dad and we've lost them in the house, both of us. Because I said to Sam, "Can you move those? Because I'll eat them." She went, "Yeah, I'll hide them," and she doesn't know where. Equally, thanks Harry for mentioning they're not being as bad as Sam. That's actually my new mantra. So whenever I try and remind myself, that I've got ADHD, I just say, at least I'm not as bad as Mrs. ADHD.
Indeed. We are both bewildered and grateful to all of our listeners. So this week, we'd like to say hello and welcome to our listeners in South Sudan, because their official language is English, because they've got 60 native languages. I've been on Wikipedia again, James.
Just awful rubbish that you pour into this podcast on a weekly basis, Alex.
Thank you.
Okay. As usual, this disfigured waxwork dummy based on Donald Trump of a podcast is a tragedy in 3 parts. We choose a theme. Last week was just gloriously about ADHD and sex. And this week we've sadly had to move on to something which isn't quite as difficult for Alex to talk about. And that's imposter syndrome. This is kind of loosely, and I'm sure that I haven't read the script for the psychoeducation bit because you did it and it's going to be shit. But imposter syndrome, if you like, it's that feeling where you don't feel like you don't belong, or you aren't good enough, even when there is clear evidence saying the opposite. Quick thank you to many people who suggested this topic, including Jade. the 3 parts, as usual, will include that evidence-based psychoeducation delivered by the man who is the literal square peg in a round hole, Alex the Psychoeducation Monkey.
Well, I'll be a round head, wouldn't I, in a square hole, because I'm literally round. That's
it says peg, not head. That's the thing. Oh, it doesn't say round. So again, did you write that? Did you write that joke?
It says literal.
Oh God, I can't. I've got to stop you. I've got to stop you having any involvement in the preparation.
I don't know why you let me edit the script. I honestly don't.
It's because it's on a shared fucking drive, and you know that you can edit it, for God's sake. Right. Fuck me. Where were we? Our personal reflections on imposter syndrome, of which there are many. I think I even mentioned it in last week's podcast that it was imposter syndrome that led to me pushing. This is ADHD off. Anyway, and in the third and final bit, we'll give you some top tips, maybe, on how to deal with imposter syndrome. Like, don't push your wife off you. No. So, Alex, how many jokes, rabbit ears, can you do about this crippling element of ADHD?
Yeah. Let's start by saying imposter syndrome is a sort of joke name. It isn't like a real medical syndrome, but it is far from a joke for so many people with and without ADHD. Imposter syndrome, as you've said, refers to that feeling you don't deserve what you have or the position you hold, often in your job, but not always. At some point, everyone is going to find out that I'm not good enough and I don't belong here. I'm not clever enough. And
so the personal reflections bit comes at the end of the podcast.
I knew you were going to do this. Yeah.
Just focus on the psychoeducation. Can you just focus on the psychoeducation for a bit and wait until the end to tell us about you?
Very good. That feeling that everyone thinks at some point, I didn't think I had to do that. Yeah, that was an open goal. This is such a common feeling. A study of 62 papers on imposter syndrome in general suggested that the lowest number was 8% of people reported having it. The highest was over 80% so it might be that blumming everyone. But the thing is, it's almost always incorrect, these feelings. It's that you don't see yourself how others do. You're harsher on yourself.
In most cases.
Yeah. Working too hard to overcompensate for perceived weakness. This is really, really dangerous. As is the feeling of guilt that you somehow don't deserve to be in this role or in this position, this relation. Both of these are incredibly unhelpful and unhealthy as well.
So, obviously, okay. I mean, some of those statistics, for once, I'm going to give you, credit, Alex. Chapeau. You did well. You delivered something that was evidence-based and interesting. And I find it fascinating that in a general population, lots of people can have this, because for me, now I know about my ADHD, it feels very much like an ADHD thing, or at least a self-esteem thing. So what causes it? Now, I should really clarify, not in you, because obviously it's an objective, evidence-based observation of your lack of ability in any forum whatsoever in life. But generally, what kind of causes it? And, do us ADHDers have it more than those without?
It's a good question, poorly put. It isn't clear where imposter syndrome originates from in people in general. It probably isn't just one thing. And for ADHD, it's even harder to say, because a search of the US National Library for Medicine, which I did, of more than 34 million citations in biomedical literature, gave me 0 results for imposter syndrome and ADHD. Just hasn't been studied. This amazes me as well, because what we do know is that it is highly likely that we have it more, because the list of things that often combine in everyone are often things that people with ADHD struggle with, such as being criticised as a child, having a natural intelligence but seemingly didn't utilise it. Oh, the classic. Did well when very young at school and it faded off. High levels of neuroticism, which is common in ADHD. Living with anxiety or depression, as we've talked about, on and on. And like ADHD, this also seems to be high in people who aren't, white men again, James. Possibly because women and people of colour are aware of the bias they face, just to be considered equal with, us. So it's self-fulfilling in a way, because you're in the culture you're in and you're perfectly aware that you're going to be judged harshly. That's
true. Okay. That, again, frustratingly and annoyingly, was actually quite interesting. So what can people do about it, you miserable doom monger?
Nothing. Sort of.
Hey!
Hey, nothing. Sort of. There isn't a cure. There really isn't a cure for imposter syndrome. And there are a lot of studies looking at treatments. But some good news. Most experts recommend, and this is hard for us. Ding. That was last week. Check yourself. Check yourself when it's happening. This isn't easy if you've got ADHD in general. So, I'm putting that caveat there. But try and have an internal awareness of it. A really good tip is to have a third person self chat kind of thing. I would advise a quiet one inside your head or you look weird. So this is imposter syndrome you're feeling, Alex. James does love you and values you in real life. I have to say those things. Literally using the name Alex instead of you or me. That would be a good example, James.
No, it wouldn't. But it wouldn't, though, would it? It wouldn't. It wouldn't be a good example. It's a terrible example, and you're doing top tips during psychoeducation. I'm now all over the place. I don't know what's going on.
That wasn't top tips. It was evidence of what to do. That's true. Yeah, it wasn't mine though. So the other thing is to look at this is also a top tip. Look at the evidence and believe it. So that's what all research says is when people deal better with their imposter syndrome because it ain't going away. It's because they are prepared to look at the evidence of the thing that they don't believe. And if they can't do it, asking for help in the research literature shows asking for help to understand your value seems to work a little bit because other people see that your value more clearly than you do. That's it. That's what the research doesn't say, quite frankly, but there's bits. Thanks, James.
That's my pleasure. I do like how we often, we'll have a template script for episodes, which, as we now all know, Alex will go and tinker with just before we record to annoy me. But I've put down awful as usual, Alex, and time for a break because normally this part of the podcast is a bit shit, isn't it? Yeah. But I've said twice that you've done quite well, so that feels inauthentic. So I'll say average, Alex, average overall, well done. We'll be back in part 2 for some personal reflections.
I'll take it. Welcome back to episode 46 of the ADHD Adults podcast. We are talking about ADHD and imposter syndrome. As always, as this is part 2, we are talking about our personal reflections on the theme. We're going to start with old pink hair, previously silver robot hair himself, James. James, imposter syndrome. Come on.
Silver robot hair. Yeah, imposter syndrome. So it won't surprise many of our listeners that, as usual, this is something I struggle with because every subject, apart from menopause and being a parent, when it comes to this podcast, I struggle with massively so. We kind of, in some ways, touched on this ding in last week's episode. But when particularly in my academic career, so I always wanted to be a doctor. A proper doctor, Al. Not like us, pretend doctors, scientists.
A useful doctor.
Yeah, a doctor that has some kind of value in the world. I always wanted to be a proper doctor, but I was a bit thick and had ADHD. And therefore, it was never on. I went to a shit school. Good one. It was quiet enough that I almost missed it. Well done for you. Cheers. Alex made a gag, everybody. So bit thick, ADHD, really bad school. I was never going to go to medical school and be a proper doctor, was I? For fuck's sake. And actually, from there, from those very early stages, I always felt whenever I was engaged in anything where there were people around me who were more kind of legitimate, so had gone and done that great career thing, had become a doctor, had gone to a good university. I didn't go to a good university, Alex. I'm not going to name it, but it's not known as a good one because they wouldn't have taken me with 2 A-levels and general studies, very bad grades. So when I managed to fail upwards spectacularly, as we've talked about in the past, to end up with a PhD as a researcher and then a kind of a lecturer in university, fuck me, the imposter syndrome was powerful. Massively powerful, even when I was working at that not so good university. But then when I moved over and met you, coincidentally, at Warwick University, the imposter syndrome, it was uncontrollable. It was a monster running around in my head that I would not even figuratively, Alex, I would literally have the thought on, if not a daily basis, at least several times a week of, someone's going to work out I'm shit at this pretty soon. You haven't got long. Enjoy it while it lasts, because you're in the company of people who are much better than you. I changed my name, Al, before. Well, when I started my academic career, no one called me fucking James. My name was Bob. It was short for everyone. As a child, it was Jim, then Jim Bob, and then Bob. No one called me James. But the first person at university that said James, I went, yep. And I thought, well, that sounds more impressive, James, doesn't it? It's I can't let them know that people call me something else.
And when you were in those meetings, right, when you first started back in the old days, when we were first started working, everyone always wanted your opinions about stuff. And in the meetings, it was like, so what did you think? Did you think we were like making it up or joking or what?
No, I just thought they hadn't worked it out yet. I've blagged them because I sometimes have the ability to talk about stuff and be nice. That can get you a long way in academia, where many people are complete cunts.
Have you tried being nice on this podcast?
No. Listen, I've known you for far too long to ever have the possibility of being nice to you, introduce within my personality. It's not going to happen.
No.
So back then, I just thought, well, they're going to work it out. It'll happen. Don't worry. They're going along with this because you're nice and because you offer an opinion which you literally make up on the fucking spot, and it never just hasn't happened yet to be terrible. It was all the time, constant fear. I'm going to get discovered. I'm going to get found out. What the hell am I doing in this job? I'm a shit scientist. I mean, I've got ADHD. I couldn't follow a list of instructions to do an experiment to save my fucking life. I'd always miss stuff out or leave stuff going. I was a terrible scientist.
Yeah, me too.
So I changed my name because I thought people would think more of me if I was James. A few people have spoken to me about this. I haven't completely lost my accent. But believe me, this is not a Kidderminster accent. Kidderminster accent is not very attractive. So I tried to mask my accent when I went into academia, because again, I thought these are all clues that people will use to work out I'm shit. My name, my accent, what I look like, for example. So I spent a good 15 years, I reckon, in academia, just waiting for that moment where someone's going to tap me on the shoulder and say, sorry, why the fuck do we employ you again? And that fear was with me every day. And I can't even remember what it was that stopped it. I would love to remember what it was that stopped it. And we talked about this a lot, because Alex, offline everybody, is actually very nice to me most of the time, some of the time. And Alex would often, as I've talked in the past, not surreptitiously, well, he would sneakily coach me, stick coaching into conversation to try and get me to realize that maybe I wasn't shit. But it was crippling every day for 15 years. And then I'm not really sure what drove this, but I kind of had this epiphany. And this is why it's difficult now I coach people to talk about this subject, because my experience was it just happened. And I can't say to people, you know what, stop giving a shit. Stop giving a shit what people
Pull
think.
yourself together.
Exactly. But that's what happened to me. And I don't know what it was. We've talked a lot about this in the past. I got a couple of promotions quickly at work, and a couple of people made comments about those promotions which savagely made me stop talking to almost everybody in my department. I had a mug that said, I hate everybody I work with. And I would walk around with this mug drinking tea just as a way to stop people talking to me. And that came from two people saying something a little bit snidey when I got promoted. But then weirdly, I just got to this point where almost overnight, I realized I don't give a fuck what anyone thinks unless they're important to me. I honestly don't care. And that stopping caring meant that the imposter syndrome, it almost melted away overnight. And I kind of realized it doesn't matter what other people think. It's really unhelpful to say zero fucks given, but this epiphany happened, and I was able to stop worrying so much about whether I am an imposter. But a little bit like grieving for what might have been, I reckon I probably could have been a happier teddy bear without all that constant fear of getting found out for 15 years of my life. What about you, Balloonhead?
I get that. I want to ask you that. Where did an ADHD diagnosis come into that epiphany? Was it before, after? I'd say a good 4 years afterwards. And although we had discussed unprofessionally my ADHD before that, I'd already forgotten that I possibly had it. Oh, okay.
I genuinely, I can't remember what it was. I don't know. Anyway, it just kind of happened, and I wish I could explain it and then bottle it and sell it to people, because I'd make more money.
That's the spirit.
Exactly.
Product of the week. This is a tricky one for me, James, and I would say this is slightly embarrassing. I'm not crippled with self-doubt. That's a phrase.
Fucking understatement of the decade there.
Yeah. It's the psychopath thing, I think. I'm not a psychopath, but I'm not a million miles away.
I'm a normal human being.
Honestly. Yeah, I'm regular. But at the same time, I don't have very much emotional empathy. I think I have felt it in the past. But from a professional perspective, I'm very careful with what I do. I do what I'm good at, and I don't ever put myself in the weak position. That's RSD, right? That's strong. I didn't know I was doing it when I started this approach, but what I was doing was avoiding the imposter syndrome trap of thinking that sort of any successes lose value, because we think they're due to an illusion of success. And what I mean is, when people ask me to do tasks that I know I'm bad at because of ADHD, I say, no, never going to happen. And if it means leaving the job, I have done that. Privilege, klaxon, alert. But and also, being a little bit sociopathic means I don't really have it. Interestingly, though, the aspect of it I do have is the fear of I'm not able often to do things for a second time, like a lot of ADHD people, because it's boring the second time. This can cause me real problems when people expect me to. There is a place to have it, though, James. I've been thinking about it, and it is right here, right now. When I look at the audience number and I read it out, and I love doing this podcast, it's brilliant. I love the community because they're so positive, much more than most internet communities. There is a screaming voice saying, "You're not qualified for this. You're not a doctor. You're not a proper doctor." And so I guess it's not very much because I'm a psychopath, but there is a little bit of it.
Does that voice sound like me at all?
No, it's in written form actually from about 80,000 people. You're not very good at this.
I mean, you're not. No. They're right. And
yes.
Fundamentally, obviously, I'm just waiting for the right person and
Correct.
moment to replace you. It's interesting when you talk about this because for a very long time, I've hated intensely the really wanky language you use around success, and which I now have adopted as an ADHD coach. When you would talk about when you left a certain university for another university and about how you made sure that your values and goals was something, I forget it because it's very boring. But I find it interesting knowing you and knowing that degree of sociopathic behavior that you have, but also knowing the shit that you went through in your career when actually you were very unhappy and you were in just the wrong place doing the wrong thing, and seeing you unhappy didn't give me joy, Alex, which I find surprising. No, it didn't at all. It didn't give me joy. That's probably giving away something, peek behind the curtain there, but no, it didn't. And then seeing you being happy when you moved to a place where actually, and I don't think any of this was imposter syndrome based, but I've always found that the way in which you talk about success very abstract because it's different to me. For me, it's all about external success. For years, it was all about people thinking I'm good, other people thinking I'm good, and the fear of people realizing, which I accepted and embraced from a very young age, I'm not good, I'm shit, I'm useless, I'm ugly, I'm fat, I'm thick, there's nothing good about me. These are all evidence-based facts, in my opinion, and therefore the preparedness for somebody doing that shoulder tap and saying, you're shit, it was almost like the answer would be, yeah, fair enough, I'll go then, clear my desk. Because I knew it wasn't a fear of it coming, Alex. I knew it was coming, even though it never came. Ding.
Yeah, that's very classic. I think defining success as validation is a form of success. I wouldn't say
you've gone straight into the wanky language that really fucking annoys me.
If you've got ADHD, ask someone for help to figure out what you actually feel success is, because it ain't money.
That's better.
That's it. Is that all right?
That's better. I get that. Right. Okay. Obviously, as usual, Alex has changed the script, and it says no time for the game today. Blah blah blah. Whatever script diddler. We're going to carry on with the mode of giving you a choice because you're shit at this game. I believe you got it wrong last week. Is that correct? Is that a correct summation? Nobody knows. Nobody cares apart from me. So you've got two choices, Alex. One of them is medication, and one of them is the choice you rejected from last week, which is laptops. Medication, laptop, medication.
Somebody
laptop.
Couldn't be bothered to write another. option.
No, you fucking no. Somebody couldn't be bothered to listen to the new game in that you'll have an option each week, and the one you don't choose will stay on the option list. So get fucked.
Algorithmically, it's not then a 50-50. I'm not even doing that. Right, I'll have meds, please. I will never choose laptops. I promise you that one. Unless I forget.
Fuck. Right. Okay. You will. So obviously, I'm looking at them now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Probably around 10 different medicines a day, which with ADHD can be problematic, obviously. So what's happened in the last week with my medication? Are you ready, Alex?
Yeah.
Option 1 is, did I forget to turn up for a blood test, so the prescription has now been taken away from me? That's option 1. Option 2, did I forget to collect my prescription for such a long time that it timed out? And that can happen, people. If you forget to pick up a prescription, it can time out if you've not actually physically collected it. And option 3, did I forget to take my medication entirely for more than 5 days?
Ooh, right then. I think that you didn't leave your prescription there because Sam has to go to Boots once a week anyway to buy you a new hot water bottle. I think that it wasn't the... It's a bit obscure. I think that it was... I think it wasn't the blood test. I think it wasn't the blood test because you had your monkeypox blood test 2 days anyway. So I think it's the 5 days thing.
I mean, you're wrong, obviously. I don't even need to read out the result because, of course, you're wrong. And at some point, you're going to have to change your strategy. It's the blood test. I forgot the blood test, which you have to have for my bipolar medication. So I now can't order my bipolar medication. I can't order my medication that stops me having a mental health crisis, Alex, because I missed the blood test because I've got ADHD. It's an ableist whirlwind of bullshit. But yeah, you got it wrong. You continue to be shit. We'll now take a break and we'll come back in part 3 for top tips. See you then.
Hate the game.
Welcome back to part 3 of episode 46 of the ADHD Adults podcast, where we're talking about imposter syndrome, also known as Alex syndrome. In this final part, we talk about top tips, and usually, as you're aware, Alex steals mine, and I let him go first, but because he's so bad at and what's James lost, mislaid, or forgotten this week, we'll continue in that vein. So, Alex, do you have any top tips for people?
Also known as Alex syndrome. That is the worst. That's worse than any of the jokes you don't let me do. Right, top tips for imposter syndrome. This is a tricky one because there isn't a permanent tip for this. So I know you're going to hate this language, but the best one for me is to get to know not only what you're good at, but what you value and what you enjoy being good at. The other is to remember that you can't do everything. We're not robots like Robbie from the Asimov classic iRobot. That's a popular example of a robot.
Best robot ever.
So we're not robots. So if you think that because you're human who gets tired and forgets things and gets bored, especially with ADHD, then somehow you can't be good at your job and people criticize you. Remember that everyone is human and everyone feels those things. So you're saying, by saying that you're an imposter, you're saying no one deserves to be in any role. No doctors, no teachers. That isn't logical, and therefore your imposter syndrome isn't in fact logical. It's the same top tips as before, which is ask someone else. Other people are more realistic about you than you are in a positive way. That's always the case. All research shows that, and that's the tip, is to ask someone for help. And that third party chat helps. James does love you, Alex, and actually fancies you in many ways. For example,
yeah,
that's
just one plucked out of nowhere. Well, thank you for that, Alex.
Yeah, you're welcome. What about
thank
you?
Thank you for not stealing any of mine.
It's because they're so terrible.
Well, of course. I mean, why would you steal a piece of shit? Obviously. Yeah. Okay. So what I'm going to say now is going to sound slightly disingenuous, but obviously it involves you, and therefore I have to legally and contractually give you some kind of abuse. The important thing is, for me, when it comes to imposter syndrome, the bit about the fact that we have these feelings despite there being evidence to the contrary, and that for me is the key thing. Is actually, how do I put this? When I went to that top 10 university where you were working, what eventually helped me a bit with that imposter syndrome is realizing that everybody else was just as shit as me. Now, you can change the word shit and put good in. And I say shit because you were at that university, so it's a slightly veiled dig at you, obviously.
Yeah, it's good.
But most other people feel the same. As you've said from some of the studies, as many as 80% of people are thinking the same thing that you are. They're thinking, I'm not good at this. I'm not great, etc. And what you tend to find is if you actually objectively look at your performance in an arena, whether it's work, whether it's social life, what you generally tend to find is actually when you look at the evidence, you're not an imposter. You're not bad at what you're doing. Nobody is waiting to sack you or to tell you that you're rubbish, because everybody else is pretty much the same as you, probably. Obviously, this is a massive generalization, but you're probably not completely fucked if somebody realizes how shit you are, because you are equally good / bad as most of the people that you work with, apart from Alex, who's objectively worse. Another thing to do, and Alex has talked about this, and again, this is also linked to evidence base, is that there are going to be things that you do well, which you might struggle accepting it. You might struggle emotionally saying, well, no, actually, I am good at doing this thing. But there are going to be things that you do well in that arena that you have imposter syndrome. So fucking write them down. Write them down. And when you have those negative thoughts, when you think, oh God, I'm terrible, get that list out and look at it. Look at those evidence-based facts about yourself, stuff that you might not like saying out loud, and say it out loud. I have a perfectly spherical face, for example. That type of thing said out loud will help deflect some of those negative thoughts a little.
Alex has a
yeah, exactly. Yeah, Alex. Things that to be true about yourself. You have a negative thought about your job, when you get that feeling, that someone's going to tap you on the shoulder, read out those positive statements and really read them out. And
James,
yes,
it's so accurate. Remember, we have to remember always as coaches of often ADHD people that ADHD people are shit at this. That's not imposter syndrome. We actually are. So if you're not sure how to think about positives of yourself, one tip we've talked about before in coaching was think of something that actually you felt good about, that was a success that you liked rather than a success that you didn't like doing, and ask what happened in that? What did I do? What did I contribute? And it's those are your positives. Write those down. Sorry, James. Yeah.
No, it's fine. And equally, ask somebody that you love and trust.
Yeah.
In my case, I was about to say that'd be Mrs. ADHD. I suppose it would be. Ask somebody that genuinely has a different opinion of you than yourself to help you with that. Someone you trust to help you with that list of statements, evidence-based statements. I'm not shit. I'm good at these things. Because if you write it yourself, sometimes, we talked about this before. We don't have very good metacognition. We're not good at thinking about thinking. Many of us have self-esteem issues, so we'll struggle with saying or writing positive things. So if you can get a ringer in to help, you write that list, get them in to help. And as I say, remember, fundamentally, everyone else, at least in Alex's case, is also. Actually, no, you're not shit and feeling the same way, are you? Because you're psychopathic. I forgot the thing.
Yeah, not bothered.
I did. Yeah, but yeah. Many other people are going to be thinking the same as you, and thinking the same as you, and try and remember that fact. Difficult, again, particularly when you've got ADHD, and working memory and controlling emotional responses is difficult. But this is why writing things down and having a list can help deflect those negative thoughts. That was a long, pregnant pause. You can say something?
I am. I'm going to say, can I do product of the week?
Yeah, because it's not one written down. I mean, is it good or bad? And again,
it's almost a caveat to what we've said, and it is this:
okay.
If with many people, imposter syndrome actually drives them to external success. If that is at the expense of your health, your mental health or physical, or if your imposter syndrome is driving you towards not being successful, however you define that, so losing your job, in those circumstances, please consider getting help. Getting professional, not from people like us, but actually useful clinical help from a counsellor, therapist, maybe CBT or similarly, because that's my product of the week, James. Because in those circumstances, it's making you miserable to the point where you need some support.
And I think that's a really kind of annoyingly powerful and helpful thing to say. Actually, is that this can go beyond just feeling a bit anxious at work to the point where it's having a profound effect on your mental health. On that cheery note, that was episode 46 of the ADHD Adults podcast, where we talked about ADHD and imposter syndrome. If you've enjoyed this and any other episodes, which is fucking highly unlikely.
Unlikely.
Why not support the show on the link? Because otherwise Alex is going to have to start doing street performance where he talks about science and or medieval kings and queens in order that people will pay him to shut up. Although he did make about, what was it, Al, 3 million quid last Thursday?
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah. So as usual, if you'd like to get in touch, contact us on the socials. It does take us a little bit longer to answer because we're getting lots of messages, but we honestly promised we will answer all those messages, and at some point the emails as well, because we think we've both forgotten how to log into the email account again.
Keeps asking for iPop. I don't even know what the question is.
Yeah. So if you've emailed us, apologies. Basically, we'll get to it, or Alex will get to it at some point. Until next time, we will see you. Take care.
Bye all.
Trigger warning, klaxon, 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 big klaxon. Trigger warning, klaxon, 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 klaxon. Trigger warning, klaxon, klaxon, klaxon.